Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Rochelle, the Right Now Coach, and this is Stop Procrastinating and Start Writing. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a few more people who are not quite here yet, but maybe they're procrastinating and they'll be here later. We'll see. Um, let's see if I can figure this out. So what I'll be sharing with you are 10 tools that will change your life. I hope. If you don't know me, I'm the author of 12 books, including Write-a-thon, Level Up, and Mightier Than the Sword. I'm also both an ICF certified coach and an ADHD coach. On the side, I'm a mom and a teacher and an editor. I would say that, I've learned over the years how to show up every day to write, even when I don't feel like it. But that would be a slight lie because it's harder lately, especially as I find the rejections piling in. I'm less inclined to want to write. And so I get discouraged, it gets more difficult, and I end up turning to my dogs or social media or busy work, anything to avoid the thing that I really want to do, probably because of fear, maybe because it sometimes feels pointless. But I still want to write. And so I have created this big system of tools to help me and my clients write every day, even when I pretty much rather be doing anything else. So what's your story? Why are you here? So go ahead and put in the chat if you're a procrastinator, just yes or no. Yes, I'm a procrastinator. If you're not, you're probably just, you probably should just go. But if you are a procrastinator, put in the chat, yes, I procrastinate. It's okay to admit it. We're all friends here. Olympic level, I love that. Yes, good. So I'm not the only one. I used to think I was not a procrastinator, but it's very clear as the deadlines come faster and faster. It's very clear that I'm good at procrastinating. So let me talk a little bit about how I see it showing up in people's life. Maybe you need to create consistent content for work, but you put off writing it, or maybe you put off sharing it with others or turning it in. You'd rather clean the house. Maybe you've always dreamed of writing a book. Maybe you've even gotten somewhat far in your process of writing a book, but wherever you are, you're stuck, and so you don't get around to it. Maybe you want to publish your book, but you haven't found the right market, and looking for the right market is hard. Maybe you think, I'm going to work on this project when I have more time, when I know more, when I feel inspired, when I've got the perfect outline, or when it gets closer to deadline. At least those are things that I have thought. These are all images of procrastination. Procrastination is simply delaying the desired or important task in favor of less important work. It's really just an approach avoidance conflict. So you want to do the task, but you resist doing the task. So it's one of those kind of approach avoidance things. So I want to talk about some of the common beliefs and myths around procrastination. So one of the beliefs is that procrastination is about managing time, and that people who procrastinate are just disorganized or lazy. And I've certainly had those beliefs about myself and about the students I've worked with in various iterations. But it's not true. People who procrastinate are simply practicing an avoidance strategy. And most procrastinators only delay their work in one or two areas of their life, not in all of them. So most people who procrastinate are perfectly capable of doing a lot of things. They get dinner on the table every day. they exercise, they do certain things, but maybe they don't do one or two things that are really important to them. Another belief is that you can inherit the procrastination gene. My mother's always, given to say, "Oh yeah, your kids do that because I do that," and it's not true in the case of procrastination. Procrastinators are made, not born. It's really a coping mechanism, and maybe a coping mechanism related to trauma or a difficult experience when you were a kid, or in your first kind of big assignments like in high school or college. So this is the good news, because procrastination is a habit you develop and not a trait. You can definitely change it. Another belief is that all procrastination is bad. um, this is another myth. So all procrastination is delay, but not all delay is procrastination. There's also this thing called precrastination. Precrastinators sometimes finish before they've allowed an idea to kind of percolate. So if you've ever been a teacher, precrastinators are the students who kind of turn in their half-baked projects early. Their story, if you have a kid who like gets their homework done really fast just to have it done, there may be precrastinators. Delaying can sometimes be helpful because it gives you time to kind of think through an idea and think if the idea is going to work or not, or the best way it's going to work. Another belief is that people work best under pressure. And that's a myth. I don't think anybody works best under pressure. You might work harder under pressure. You might get like a little high working under pressure because it releases endorphins to have to really race against the clock to get something done. So you might feel like you work best under pressure because it feels good. Just like, after you have a really great cup of coffee, you feel so smart and able to do things. And every so often I'll have that experience of having really strong coffee and go, wow, I just feel so smart and capable. And it's all a lie. It's just the caffeine. So here are some facts about procrastination. I've done a little research lately. There's a new survey. 71% of people admit they procrastinate. Many of us procrastinate 2 to 3 hours a day, which adds up to about 55 days a year. So just think about like, what would you do with 55 extra days a year? We usually use our phones to procrastinate, spending on average 4 hours and 37 minutes a day on our phones. Not all of that time is procrastinating. Some of it we're doing things that are important, but some of it is busy work. 20% of people, or like 1 in 5 people, identify as chronic procrastinators. There's a strong emotional component to procrastination. So we procrastinate to cope with emotions either in the present or because we had like a traumatic event in the past that we're trying to recover from. And we used procrastination to cope with that difficult trauma. And so we still procrastinate. So for me, I had a lot of trauma as a kid around the fact that I couldn't do math. And my dad was a math professor and he would scream at me about not being able to do math. Well, wouldn't you know, whenever I have to do math, even like turning in an invoice that requires counting, multiplication, I put it off. I totally procrastinated, and I probably would never do it if I didn't want to get paid. So, remember there's a strong emotional component. Remember that procrastination is a habit. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're a failure or incompetent. It's simply a coping mechanism. It's how you learn to cope. So why should we try to overcome procrastination? Well, you're here, so I know you want to. It's because you're going to spend less time agonizing. You're going to write more. You're going to get more done. You're going to feel that sense of relief at the end of a day that you got this thing done that you wanted to do. And so you're going to feel better about yourself. So before we talk about the tools, how to overcome procrastination, I want to talk about what kind of procrastinator are you? So for this, it's going to be important to have your hand out along with a pen so you can kind of look at the list and just circle the ones that sound like you or give it like a star next to it if that sounds like you. Um, so the categories I'm using come from this book, How to Beat Procrastination in the Digital Age by Linda Sapadin. It's a great book. I got it as an ebook and found it to be a really helpful tool for me. So I'm using her ideas in this section. So the first type is the perfectionist. So if you had a t-shirt, it would say, but it's not perfect. And your mantra might be, or the thing that you say to yourself might be, well, I would do this, but I worry it's not going to be good enough. Um, so some of the things that I think are typical of people are perfectionists. You might have trouble completing tasks if you can't do them perfectly. So you might rather not do something than do it poorly. Perfectionists tend to feel failure and success. They worry about the how, what if I do it wrong? They deal with imposter syndrome. So maybe they feel like they're not good enough, don't have the credentials. And perfectionists tend to pay a lot of attention to details, maybe too much attention. So if you're a perfectionist, you're the kind of person who has to go over your paper or your work multiple times before you're willing to send it in. And it may even cause you to not send something in because you're worried it's not perfect. So go ahead and star that if that sounds like you. The second type is the dreamer. So you may be a person who wears a Disney shirt, or you may have something that says, I hate dealing with details. You might think something like, I would write this or do this, but I have so many ideas. Maybe I should do a musical or maybe just a soundtrack, or wait, what about? So you are the person who has a lot of grand ideas about what your project should be and how it should look. And those sometimes freeze you up from going forward. So these are some of the things, and you can star the dreamer if this sounds like you. You're adept at generating ideas, but you have trouble with following through. While the perfectionist pays too much attention to details, you don't like to pay attention to details. You would rather someone else do that. You have trouble finishing projects. So you're good at starting, and you have difficulty finishing. You also are frustrated when a product doesn't match the picture in your head. And this might be at different phases of the project that you procrastinate because it's just not matching what you envision when you go to sleep at night and fantasize about the project. The next type is the worrier. So dear worriers, and I might be one of those, you might have a t-shirt that says, but I'm afraid to make a change. So you might worry, you might say things to yourself like, I do this, but what if no one likes it? What if I can't sell it? What if I'm a failure? You come up with all the reasons why it's not going to work. So if you're a worrier, you might be hesitant to leave your comfort zone. You might have a long list of what ifs. So you might think a lot about, you might be starting a book and thinking about publishing it already. Like, what if they won't publish it? What if this won't happen? You might be more concerned about the future than the present. You might worry that your work isn't good enough for the various people who will encounter it. The crisis maker. This is our typical movie character of the procrastinator. So if you were going to see a procrastinator in a movie, they would be the crisis maker. They would have the shirt that says, but I work best under pressure. And they would be the person who would say, I would write this, but it's not due yet. So these are all the kind of silly college movies about people not getting their work in. So the crisis maker likes to work under pressure. They're not enough concerned about the future. So while the worrier and the dreamer are more concerned about the future, the crisis maker in the present is not thinking ahead. They're thinking typically about the present. And they have a difficult time working on a project that doesn't have a deadline, and really that doesn't have a lot of markers or steps along the way. And then we have the defier. And I feel like the defier can also be someone that's a little bit stereotypical in our society. So the defier is the one that says, but why should I have to do this? And the defier is a little rebellious. So they say, you know, I do this project, but why should I do it the way the boss or the editor wants me to do it? So the defier tends to be rebellious and actively defying authority. They might be verbal about that, or they might be passive aggressive. So they might be passive aggressively defy authority. I saw this a lot in the students I worked with when I was teaching. They tend to rebel against what others want them to do or the way they want them to do it, you know, like the manual style that they use, or how they're going to do their footnotes, or how they're going to put it together at the end. As a writer, this might come out with like, why should I play by the rules? Or why is doing it this way a requirement? And then we have the pleaser. And I think, you know, this is another one that's common. The pleaser procrastinates because they have too much to do. So it's, you know, I would do this, but I promised X, Y, or Z that I would do this first. So the pleaser is maybe overly concerned about what others want or need. They have trouble saying no to other people. They tend to put their own projects at the bottom of the pile. So if you're a pleaser and you have other people's work to review, you might do that before doing your own. You know, and sometimes we use that as an excuse. I mean, I think we all will sometimes rather do anything but the project we have to do. But the pleaser tends to be the person, you know, who feels compelled to do other people's work first. So I'm curious about what your type is. So if you, I'm going to open the chat, and if you want to put like what type you are, I'd just be curious to see what we have in the mix. I think I tend to be a dreamer and a worrier. And I think most of us have a couple of different styles, and you may have a style that emerges in certain situations. So if you work with a very, I find that if I work with a very controlling boss, then I tend to be more of a defier. So Susan, you're a dreamer with hints of worrier, crisis maker, perfectionist, dreamer, crisis maker, several, but mostly perfectionist and worrier. Yeah, thank you. And I think, you know, my sense is that different parts of us come out at different times in our life and in different situations. So I think it's good to just know these. At the end of the session, I'm going to give you hints for each type. So after we go through everything, then we'll go through the hints for each type. I think those can be the most helpful if you can kind of strategize what's good for you. So what I want to present to you is a system of 10 tools that will help you stop procrastinating and start writing, even if you don't feel like it. This may get overwhelming, so just do what you can to kind of take notes. Later, reflect on what is going to be the most helpful for you. So the first thing I think is important to do is to deal with the feelings. You know, as I look at the 6 types of procrastinators, it's very clear to me that that fear and emotion are behind all of our types of procrastination. Thank you all for putting your types in. It's really good to read them. Um, so this is kind of the feel the fear and do it anyway. So let's go back to that. So one of the things I've read, I believe it's in the book My Stroke of Insight, by Jill Bolton Taylor, is that we experience a feeling for about 90 seconds, and then it goes away. So those intense feelings are not persistent over hours and hours. So if you're experiencing procrastination and suspect that what you're feeling is fear, try to ride that out for about 90 seconds and see how that goes. I've experienced anxiety for most of my life, so I know that's really hard. What you can do is take a deep breath and say to yourself things like, you're safe, you're okay, this feeling will pass, it will be fine. I think it can be helpful to simply write through the fear, but you can take a pause and then get right back to it, maybe set a timer for 10 minutes. And you might have to repeat this tool as often as necessary. Um, a second tool that I think is really important is to stop agonizing over the how. So I think oftentimes procrastination or writer's block is really that we're agonizing over how we're going to do something. So we don't know what we're going to do. We don't know how to move forward on the project, so we procrastinate. So if that's you, I think it's important to take time to figure it out. So let's say you're procrastinating because you're not sure how to structure a novel or a nonfiction book, or you don't know how to revise it. Well, set aside some time to figure out, like, what's the best way to do this. If you don't know how to do it, so if you take a half a day, you take a couple hours and you try to make a game plan and it feels like it's not going to work still, then maybe hire a reader, hire someone to read that portion or talk to someone about that portion, and see if they can give you help. Um, if you don't know how to do something, if you're doing something in a new genre, it can be helpful to take a class, read a book, talk to an expert. What I often do when I hit a part in a book that I don't know is I get out a bunch of mentor texts and I think, how did other authors dealing with having to explain a complicated topic deal with it? Or, how did other authors talk about this kind of work to children? And so just looking at the way a bunch of different people do it can sometimes help. It can also help, to hire a coach. Just and that's where I think I come in handy, is you can talk to someone who knows the field and just talk through the ideas, and maybe in talking it out, you will come up with an idea. But if you're stuck because of the how, either take time to figure it out or get help, whatever that looks like. The third thing I think that helps is habit. I think one way to tackle the fear of writing is to write more. So I think sometimes what happens with procrastination is that we leave our writing to a decision we're going to make each day. So we say we're going to get up and we're going to decide whether or not we feel like it. And my hint is we never feel like it, or we rarely feel like it. So I think it helps to find a regular time to write. A time for 3 or 5 days a week that you're going to show up to do your writing. And it doesn't have to be long. It could be a half an hour, it can be an hour. If it helps, piggyback on something you already do. So the goal is to make writing a habit. One way to make something a habit is to stack it with an existing habit. So psychologists call this habit stacking. I had never heard of this. I've been calling it piggybacking for years. So habit stacking is just, let's say you have a break and have coffee every morning. Well, then stack your writing with that. Or, in the afternoon, you have a habit of looking at your email. Well, can you write right before you do the email, or can you write right after you do the email? Is there a way you can stack it with something you reliably do, like having lunch? Um, if you don't have a project to work on, you can start making writing a habit by doing a daily journaling. So, you get up, have your cup of coffee, write 3 pages quickly. And this will help you make it into a habit. Um, I'm not identifying a specific time of day because I think each of us have our own times of day that work for us, both with our schedules and with our inner circadian clocks. So I tend to write best in the morning, but a lot of my clients write best either, like in the mid afternoon. Another time people tend to write well is like early evening. And I've had some clients over the years who write best like at 11 o'clock at night. So that would not be me. I would sleep through it, but that might be you. Um, Another thing I think that can help when you're working to overcome procrastination is to work on 1 or 2 projects at a time, because you're going to see more progression. The one thing about working on 2 projects that can be good is that if you're really stuck on one, you can go to the other and you can go back and forth. So some things about working on a single project. It's helpful. If it's something you're passionate about and curious about, so that it's an internal drive for your project as opposed to something you're doing because you have to. Because who wants to do what you have to do? Um, it's helpful if you can connect your project to an external life purpose or an internal life purpose. So is there a reader who's going to benefit from your work? For me, as I write picture books for kids, which I feel like have no hope of getting published, if I can imagine or think of a kid that I know that would really love this story, and I can feel like I'm writing this for them, it helps me. Um, so if we can connect our project to a reader, so passion, purpose, and individual people. So that can help you in that single project, can help you get your work done. Um, Single project work works because it eliminates the question of what am I going to work on. One of the way we procrastinate is by having way too many things to do. So we're always busy, but we're not necessarily productive on the writing that we want to do. It also gives us a test ground to work on as we work with our procrastination. So we can test out different things. I'm giving you 10 tools. I would encourage you to try 1 or 2 of them at a time. And then as they work or don't work, you can add more. Another tool, if you've worked with me in the past, you know that I'm a big fan of the small step method. We don't do well with giant changes, giant steps, drastic changes. That's why most of us fail at giving up sugar or exercising or whatever we promise we're going to do by about the 3rd week in January, I think. So instead of cleaning the basement or giving up sugar or writing the book, we will do just about anything to avoid that big scary goal. And even knowing all of this, I always write book on my to-do list, and it's always something I never do. So one way to avoid that scary feeling of panic is to take absurdly small steps before to our goal. So instead of putting like write book on our to-do list, we might write, choose topic, write a paragraph on this aspect of the topic. I think it can be helpful to kind of take a big look at your project and just write a list of small steps that you need to take on your project. And if any list feels too big, then divide it into a couple of steps. So for example, I'm working on a project about Eastern box turtles, and other sorts of kind of less well-known turtles that are in danger. So I don't want to write research on my to-do list because that's a lot. So I might put research X, research Y, research Z. So each of the things I want to research, look up articles about this, look up academic articles, look up popular articles. And then when it comes to the time to write, you can assign a small step to each block of time. Or you can, if you're more of a person who likes to kind of go with the flow, you can choose a small step that you feel most like doing. So, you might have a day where you feel a lot like writing, and that day you choose a writing step. Or you might have a day where you feel like this is really a research day, or this is a thinking day. And so you do different things on different days. Another thing that I think is really helpful for me when it comes to and I found with clients as well, when it comes to overcoming procrastination, is not dealing with a blank page. Blank pages are scary. Even starting a new journal is scary because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up. So it's hard to mess up what we think in our mind as being perfect. So if you think of a project as being perfect, or you think of a query letter as being perfect, or a book as being perfect, that first step is hard. And it's also hard to know what we don't know. So instead of a blank page, I encourage people to practice pre-writing. So either to a massive brainstorm, a mind map, a list, a stream of consciousness, an image. I'm going to hold up a mind map for anybody who doesn't know. I think I have one here. I am the queen of mind maps. So a mind map is when you have your main topic in the center, and then like spokes of a bicycle, you put your other ideas around it. I think it's great just to keep some scrap paper on your computer, or near your computer, so you can just do some jotting down of where you think you might go with your work before you start writing, because I feel like that takes away some of the fear. It's something I learned with working with children, that children get super anxious about putting anything down on paper. And so if they can have some sort of a graphic organizer to organize their ideas, it can be easier. Another thing that's helpful is to start well. So in the research around procrastination, the thing that we all have trouble with is starting. So it's important to make it as easy as possible. If you know Mel Robbins, you might have heard of her countdown tool. It's called the 5-second rule. So it helps you move from idea to action in 5 seconds. So the minute you have the idea that it's time to write, you start counting down. So no matter where you are, you're walking around your kitchen, you go, oh, it's time to write. You start going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you try to be in your desk by the time you get to 1. And because you're probably, like, even with the countdown tool, you're maybe not going to feel totally motivated, that's a good time to set a timer. So this comes from the book Mind Gym by Sebastian Bailey and Octavius Black. And they recommend people, overcome procrastination by just setting a timer for 5 minutes and doing that. So just write until the timer is over. That doesn't mean you have to stop when the timer goes off. It's just a way to get you started. And then the last tool is just to embrace messy. So embrace that messy first draft. Don't worry if the first stuff you write is crappy. Just get it down. Nobody is going to look at this. I often, when I'm starting on a project or even a new section of a project, try to start in the middle, because I feel a lot of pressure to get that lead right. You want that first sentence of your chapter, first sentence of your book to be the best. So another tool is eliminate distractions. So I feel like our brains like just want us to be distracted. I think we're training our brains to be distracted by the way we read. So most of us read online. This is not a condemnation of you. This is a fact of life. Our digital devices and our online reading encourages distraction. So you get to a page and there's lots of things blinking at you. You play a game, there's a lot of things blinking at you. You just go to read the New York Times on your phone, and there are things that you can click on. And so it's training our brain to want distractions. And so what we have to do when it comes to writing is try to create an environment that is as free of distractions as possible. So, for me, this means a quiet workspace. I do want to acknowledge that is not true for everybody. So if you need music, do that. If you need a white noise, do that. I think it's helpful to have a clean computer desktop, or at least just to put your work as big as possible. If you are willing to turn off all of those notifications on your computer, so the beep that your email makes, um, the minute your computer is set, factory settings are to optimum interruptions. So your factory settings is that everything's on. And so you have to go through and turn all of that off every time you get a new app. So I try to turn off all my notifications anyways. Another thing you can do is hide your phone while you're working. So just put it away. It's a good time to charge it. Avoid what I call media multitasking. I love media multitasking. I love it. It's when you put on a movie or a show while you're doing the dishes or doing your invoices. I like to do media multitasking when I'm doing something I hate, like contracts or invoices. And let me tell you, it does not go well. So I have learned, so media multitasking, I was talking to a friend of mine who does research in brain science, and he told me that when you're doing media multitasking, you're actually shortening the telomeres in your brain. So it's actually not good for your brain to do media multitasking. And what you're really doing is rapid task switching. So you're switching between, Murder, She Wrote or whatever your show is and whatever you're working on, back and forth, which is why you can watch them over and over because you can't remember what happened. So avoid doing that. And then if you need to get distracted, find a positive distraction. So by that, I mean, when your brain says, this isn't working for me, I'm frustrated, give your brain a positive and healthy distraction. So this might be walking around the block. It might be looking out the window to see if you can find some birds. It might be just standing up and stretching for a moment. Anything that's going to raise your endorphins in a positive way. Tool number 9 is fun framing. This is my favorite tool because it's the most fun. So the idea of fun framing comes from the book Super Better by Jane McGonigal. And she says, fun framing is what happens when you decide to do something for the pure pleasure, excitement, or enjoyment of them. So there's actually research on it. It comes from DePaul University, and they were investigating why people procrastinate. They gave participants either a math test or a math game, and they gave them an hour to prepare by practicing the problems they needed to solve on either by doing the test or the game. The people who knew that they were going to play the game were less likely to procrastinate on preparing than the people who knew they were going to take the test. The idea behind this is, think about when you set up, time to go out for coffee with a friend or time to go on a hike alone. It sounds like fun. So you look forward to it. You get energetic when you're going to do it. It's great. So why not put that same kind of frame around your work? So think about, how can you treat your work as play? Can you make a game out of the task? So is there some way you can make a game? So for me, it might be, how many research pieces can I find on eastern box turtles in an hour or in 20 minutes? How many different unique pieces of research can I find? And then the next day, well, how many different unique pieces of research on this topic can I find? Another thing you could do is add a fun element. So I have my favorite glass of sport tea every afternoon. That's often my fun element when I need to do something I don't really love to do. It can also be fun to co-work. That's our show up and write coming up this fall is all about co-working and having fun. Anything you can do to amp up the fun for you. So using a great journal, a marker, working at a coffee shop, working in your pajamas, working in a corner of your house that you like, wearing something that makes you feel glamorous. It's really not what you're doing, but how you do it. That makes it fun. Uh, and the 10th tool, and I think it's the magic tool, is accountability. Um, buddies help. If starting and finishing are hard, it's good to have an accountability that you check in with once a week, or you might text it, before and after your task. So you might check in once a week and say, next week I'm going to finish this, or in the last week I finished this. You might check in like right before you write and say, I'm going to do this amount of writing, and then check in after you're done writing. If procrastination is really hard, then co-working can be really good. And just having someone on the other side of the Zoom to work with you, or even I like just going to the coffee shop and knowing that everybody else is working. The library also does the same thing because so many people work there. Um, I would say my accountability groups, which many of you have been in or are going to be in, is kind of accountability plus, because you get like extra stuff. You get coaching, you get talking through your challenges. I'm going to take a moment to talk about, the external structures that I offer that help you with writing. I know those of you who are here know a lot about this, but the people who are watching the recording might not. And then we'll get to your specific tools. So I always offer individual coaching sessions, and that can be really helpful, especially if you try some of these interventions and they don't work for you. And I'm really going to encourage you that you try them one or two things at a time. And if it doesn't work, kind of write down what about it didn't work, and really start thinking about, try a different thing, see if that works. Really kind of use yourself as a science experiment. I have my writing accountability group, which starts Monday, and we meet 6 times and we do write together. We have the writing goddess group, which meets 6 times and we review pages. And we do not do any writing together. And then Show Up and Write is the new one, and we meet 12 times, and it's mostly writing together. So let's do the tools for each style. And we're doing good. It's only 5:45. So the perfectionist. If you're a perfectionist, it's important to think realistically about tasks. What is, so what perfect is, but what's good enough for you? What's going to work? What's good enough for this situation? I think for the perfectionist, it's important to give yourself extra time for revision. So if you're a perfectionist and you have a deadline in 2 weeks, you want to make sure your stuff is done a week early, so you have an extra week to revise. And then it's important for you to find mindset tools for coping with imposter syndrome and other fears. So whatever you can do to help yourself with that perfectionist thing. For the dreamer, I would encourage you to differentiate between dreams and goals. So it's really important for you to record all of your dreams, get them all down on paper, play with them, enjoy them, find them luscious, all that stuff. And then start thinking about, look at all your dreams and think, is there one goal or two goals I want to do right now? And if you can narrow it down to one or two goals for a framework, so like for the next 3 months, for the rest of the year or for the next year, and do one or two of those goals at a time and then make a plan for that. That is going to help you a lot. I think it's important for dreamers to kind of look at all their dreams and kind of think, what are the goals that these have in common? Because sometimes you can combine a couple of them. The worrier. This is the one I know the best. Excited and worried feel the same. So that's important to remember. So if you are constantly feeling worried about your project, check in with yourself and ask yourself, am I really worried or am I excited? And try to parse that out for yourself. Use a deadline and small steps to finish the project. I think worriers and dreamers can get really overwhelmed. So if you have a deadline and you have small steps, then you can focus on what you have to do today and not worry about everything between now and publication day. If there's a way you could shift your I can't statement to I can, so you might be saying, I can't figure out how to make this book work. So think about what you can do. What can you do? Well, I can try it in first person. I can try it in third person. I can try to structure it this way. I can try to structure it that way. For worriers, I encourage you to find worry coping tools like breathing. EFT tapping is great. You can just go to YouTube and you Google YouTube. You can go to YouTube and search EFT tapping for worrying, EFT tapping for procrastination, and there are lots of free videos there that are helpful. If you are a crisis maker, so if you're a crisis maker, then you're the person who only likes to work at the deadline. You like to make a crisis of it. You like it to make it a big deal. So it's important for you to identify reasons to take action now. So if you are using the energy of the last minute to get you going, it might be helpful to have some way to capture that energy now. One way to do that is to use a timer. Another way to do it is to create a false deadline, like, I need to do this in the hour before the kids get home from school. Or, do your work like in the hour before an important call. I need to do this in the hour before I get on the phone call because it's going to give you that same jolt. Use action words like I'm doing it. And remember that engagement often happens during the work and not before. So almost everybody does not feel like doing it before they do it. Most of us just feel like doing it when we're doing it. And for some of us, it takes like 10 minutes of working to feel engaged. The defier is the toughest one, I think. But if you're a defier, view your work as request versus demand. So remind yourself, you don't have to do this. Now you may have some things that you have to do this, but so think about, in what ways can I make this my own? Define multiple ways to do the work or to respond to the situation. So make it your own. You don't have to do it the way the boss has told you or exactly that way. Find ways to make it your own. And then find your own inner nurturing parent so that there's some voice in your head telling you you're doing a good job, keep going. That can be really helpful. And the pleaser. So if you're a pleaser, dump that Superwoman, Superman myth, like I can do it all, I can take care of everybody. Reduce your need for approval. So, stop worrying about what other people think. Learn to say no. Just practice saying no. Say no gleefully. Get rid of that guilty part of yourself. Now it's your turn to ask questions. Or first, I want to encourage you. We have just a few minutes left. Let's take a minute. Just look at your calendar and schedule some time to write. So right now, I just want you to look at your schedule. I'm going to give you like a minute. Just schedule some time to write. I stopped it. Isn't it funny how it sounds like a big movie script? So then the next thing I want you to do is just for your next session, choose a small step that you can take. And if you want to do it for all your sessions, you can do that, but just write down what you think you're going to do. So, and then I'm going to recommend that when you actually, get there to write, I want you to um to take some time to plan and do your list. I'm not going to have you do it now because we're right at the end. You all know where to find me, but in case you're watching on video, this is how to get connected to me. I'm going to stop the share and answer any questions. And feel free, you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or if you feel shy and want to put them in the chat, you can do that as well. But we'll just take about 4 minutes for questions. Does anybody have any question? It's fun to go back and now read your type after talking about them. It's fun to see. So any questions? I'm afraid I've overwhelmed you all with all this information. So once again, I would say, take it slowly. I think it's great to have a journal, like a writing journal, where you kind of make a note of what you tried and what worked and what didn't. And you can do that even on your calendar, if you have room on your calendar, because it's important to kind of track your interventions. Because I think what happens to me is I forget what works. And so then I go several days of not having a good writing day and procrastinating and forget and why, what I should be doing. And it's like, oh, well, of course this isn't working. I haven't done any pre-writing, or I haven't, tackled starting, or I haven't broken it up into small steps. I mean, that's my typical one is, oh my gosh, I'm trying to write this whole thing rather than thinking about one aspect of the piece. So it might be good to keep this list with you and just, remind yourself if you find like you've got a couple of days of not writing, go back and look like what's going on. Because my guess is it's an external thing. So my sense about most of us is that when we procrastinate, we blame ourselves, when really it's an external thing that's going on. And if you can suss it out, you're going to be able to solve it. So 2 more minutes. Any questions? Feel free to write them in the chat. So I'm not seeing any. Oh, does someone have one? Go ahead.
I keep trying to, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any more resources or ideas on the fun framing and how to turn writing into play, or how to treat work as play? I'm actually having a lot of trouble with my day job writing.
Okay.
So that really
So
resonated.
what has worked for you in the past to make?
Um, well, the thing that works best, most consistently, which isn't exactly fun, it just works, is taking myself out to either Starbucks or the library and forcing myself to sit there for several hours. But it's not fun. Like, I'm not having fun with the writing, and I I need to somehow make it more fun so that I can do it and have time for my fun writing.
So
So
I guess what I would say is look at look at the rest of your life and see if there's any aspect of your life that's fun that you can borrow or recruit for your work sessions. So, and maybe look back at like, when has work been fun for me? Now, I know that's like the weirdest thing, like, really, when has work been fun? But think, when has writing been fun? When has this kind of work been fun? And think about like, just make a list, like go back, try to think of 3 great productive times and make a list of what was going on and think, is there anything I can recruit from those things? Like, is it writing at a new setting? Is it, some sort of food? Is it listening to music? Is it making sure I'm working with a colleague? Like, are there other colleagues I could meet up with and write with? Is it dressing up and going somewhere? Or is it not dressing up? The other thing I would look at is there a way you could, well, 2 things. One, is there a way that you could break it up a little bit so it's not such a long slog? So that after every 30 minutes, you get some sort of a reward. So kind of like the Pomodoro method, except I think those are usually 45 minutes, but I think that's too long. So 30 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes. Like, what can you do to break it up? And then the second thing is to kind of really lean into those rewards. So make a list of what I call small daily delights. And there's new research that says that we actually do better when we're working towards something small and a small reward than when we're working towards something big and a big reward. Because when there's a big reward, we may panic or choke or freak out. But when it's something small, it's easier. So those would be the things I would say. Recruit joy experiences from the rest of your life. Think about your most productive, fun work times and make a list of what was going on and see what you can recruit. Take breaks every 30 minutes and do something in those, some rewarding, fun things. If you've got my Level Up book, I've got a whole list of power-ups at the end. And those would be the kinds of things I recommend. And then the fourth thing I think was to give yourself a good reward. Does that help, Susan?
Yeah, I think so. It gives me some things to think about and brainstorm. Yeah,
Well,
thank
and
you.
if you find out what makes work fun, let me know because we could all use that. Well, everybody, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming. If you have a question that didn't get answered, send me an email. I know a lot of you are in groups this fall, so I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everybody, and I will see you then. Happy writing. Bye.